Namaste! Welcome to another fabulous episode of Touch My Clock, where we are going trekking and hitting the road. But before we do that, let's look and see what people have on their wrist. Eliot, what have you got today?
So I thought it doesn't really match the shirt, but for we're doing trekking, so I need something tough. So I'm wearing a Vostok Komandyrski with a bracelet that gives you the decompression times on it. Which is very useful when you're
Trekking in a mountain.
10,000 feet in the air. But what if you fall down a ravine and then you fall in the water and then you fall so loud that you need to know you have to decompress?
Right. So, Max, what have you got on your wrist?
Russian watch, very tough.
I'm pretty sure a Russian watch would be the last watch I would trust if I'm going on an expedition. My watch is the Seiko Samurai. I feel like I have a more limited collection now compared to you guys, so I'm a little bit Captain Boring in this regard. But this is my expedition watch. Not so much trekking, but if I'm going to another country, I want a watch to be tough, reliable, I can read it very legibly, then this is what I'm picking.
You can read it very legibly.
It's a very legible dial.
Yes, you want to be legible.
Interesting choices.
Get ready.
So I'm actually wearing, as a kind of a special occasion, just recently, just hit a kind of a small number birthday. So actually, Elle and I went to the Time and Tide shop, where I have to say the service was absolutely stunning. We were made to feel welcome the second we walked in there. Great range of watches, but they were so enthusiastic. No heavy sell, and it was just a superb experience. And for best thing, I got myself a lovely historical Fears, and it's the Fears Brunswick, and just beautiful white dial with really simple hands, a little bit of kind of history.
Well, it's kind of trekking, it's white.
It's kind of exactly. I think in the sunshine, it's a really, really easy, legible dial, and really, really easy to see. So how cool was that?
What?
So I think this is. What?
It would be the worst dial to have if you're doing an Arctic expedition. You can't read it. It's white on white.
Yeah, but you see the black because the hands
You
are
wouldn't
black.
see it. That's why people that go on treks specifically will avoid white.
Like a polar bear.
It's a cool watch, though.
A polar bear
Beautiful watch.
wearing a white coat in the snow.
I would rather his Komandyrski for basically
Regardless,
freak.
a really cool watch, and Fears are an absolutely fabulous company, and one of the great British watchmakers. So a nice little gift. So anyway, let's talk about trekking. Let's get into what would be a dream watch for trekking. Eliot, take it away.
Well, I have to start.
What about a bit of history first?
Is there history? Not learning?
Of trekking.
Are we not going to hear you fix your mistake of last time?
What mistake was that?
Boom, 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 boom.
Are we now back on to the old Rolex versus Smiths on top of the mountain?
Hillary and Tenzing, Norway, were at the top with the Smiths, but Rolex basically paid them to say that they were wearing
Their
the Explorer.
climbing
Only
crew all had
later
Rolexes.
did they design the Explorer.
That's true. That's why it was on.
I'm pretty yeah.
Anyway, there you go.
Another myth busted.
Was it?
Well,
Okay.
not sure, but
I feel like we got confused.
yeah, exactly.
Well, I don't think I got it wrong last time. I think what's really interesting is there are so many variations of the history. And there were a couple of people that wrote a book, and they were the author, James and Jeffrey, of the Rolex watch book, who then said that actually Tenzing wore a Rolex and Hillary wore a Smith.
Of course, Rolex said that.
But that's Rolex's book. So Edmund Hillary actually was wearing the Smiths. And then there's so much out there on the internet and so many bits and pieces. But I believe it actually was Charles Evans and Tom Bourdillon who actually had Rolexes, but they didn't quite make it to the top. And then the Tenzing and Charles came up with the kind of a rebreather system. And in 1953 they hit the summit. So most of the articles you read tells you that they had the Rolex in the pocket and the Smiths on the wrist, but there are a number of articles also turn around and say they actually didn't have Rolex at all because it didn't turn up. They were sponsored by both Smiths and Rolex with a team. Some had Rolexes, some had Smiths. So you can find different versions of that story anywhere.
You pick what you want, really.
You pick what you want on that one there.
No.
But there's a lot of...
This is the worst advice I've ever heard in my life.
But there's a lot...
Just pick the history that works.
What you want to hear.
But But the real proof is, in the worshipful company of watchmakers,
The media.
in
Look where you are.
the worshipful company of watchmakers, there is actually on exhibition the original Smith's watch that St Edmund was wearing, and he gifted it to the museum.
Right.
So that's a pretty good.
And you've got
set.
the exact same copy.
That's a pretty good set, I think, of evidence. And there's so many articles out there. It really is quite fascinating. But then Tenzing and Hillary became brand ambassadors for Rolex afterwards, but they never ever said at the time that they were wearing the Rolexes, and there's certainly no photographic proof of them wearing the watches either, which led you to believe that they had the Smiths and not the Rolex on them.
Thank you.
Hoorah! So we got
there in the end.
We got there in the end.
I feel like you changed your direction
Yeah.
as we went. Wait,
5 minutes.
you can't just pick it. No, it's clear. If Rolex as such, it's just their marketing. It's
split hair.
always pro Rolex. We're the first to do everything,
Yeah.
and like time and time again they haven't. And that's really what really kills me, because Smiths would be at such a better position if there wasn't so much trying to convince people that they were the first.
Yeah, well, not enough money.
And Smiths was another one of those brands that stopped in the 70s, sadly, and was bought by Time Factors, and Time Factors are trying to bring the brand back alive and doing some cool things with it.
Cool.
So back to your trekking, the ultimate watch you'd wear trekking.
No. So
What-
the
what
way this goes
Really?
is
What?
we each have something to say.
Oh, you've got a story.
We all have.
Okay, so Max, what's your story today?
Also, we're talking about
We researched
Arctic
this.
exploration.
We practiced and researched this for hours before.
10 minutes before.
So, my
Story. Once upon a time,
you're
there was a little lad.
Huh?
You're hosting an extra long time.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I agree.
So we're talking about trekking, but trekking within generally snowy conditions. So we're talking about Arctic explorations. Jason was talking about the Himalayas. I think it'll be quite good to jump first to Eliot, because Eliot has maybe one of the most important watches when it comes to trekking on snowy conditions, the Alaska project.
The Alaska project, you would think, Alaska project, made for Alaska, going in the snow, trekking. Yeah, it's for the moon, isn't it? I mean, Omega used a lot of code names of cities for their projects, so Alaska was, nothing to do with Alaska, actually. It was actually made for the moon. But I think it's still not a bad idea for trekking, and let me explain why.
Okay.
So this watch was made to basically explore the dark side of the moon, which is the coldest part. So temperatures on the moon go from 120 degrees to negative 130 on average. On the dark side of the moon, you can go to negative 240. So this watch was made to go to negative 140. So if you're thinking trekking, cold temperatures, I mean, what's better than having a watch that will not freeze for sure? And also, when you are trekking, you do get a lot of sun because you're much higher. So you get less density in the air. So you'll get a higher exposition to the sun, so you can burn easier. So this was made quite smartly. So I've got in the lovely book that you can read, Man and His Watch. And here it talks about this is the first prototype. And so how they made it is, first of all, they have this big anodized shell, and it's coated with a layer of quartz on the top. So it's protected from the sun on that part. And you would see that it was enveloped in this case so that the pushers will not freeze up. So you could use the last pushers, and you could use them all the time, even with minus 140 degrees. But you would think, okay, well, what's the point of a protective shell if the dial is completely exposed? But no, because they're smart. So they layered the dial with zinc oxide, a huge layer of zinc oxide. And it's kind of the same idea as spacesuits. You see spacesuits being completely white. And what it does, it just bounces off the sun and heat. So it's actually very, very protective.
So to my point, when I was saying the Brunswick would be a terrible watch, actually,
Well, it depends how it's not. If it's, I don't know, what material is the dial?
enamel?
No, it's pure polish. Metal that's pure polish.
Yeah, it'll
A little bit like the
probably
Gogeta.
burn to shreds. But anyway, if it was covered with zinc oxide, then it would be protected. It'd be quite good. So this was, you would think, yes, okay, it's made for the moon in some sense, but if you have a watch that now can go from minus 120 degrees, 140 degrees to 120 degrees positive, does not get frozen because of the pushers. It's quite large. It's quite readable because it's got these really lovely red hands that look like space rockets. It's not a bad idea.
Absolutely perfect. Welcome to Touch My Clock, where the advice is to go trekking with a moon watch.
That's a good point.
So, interestingly, before we get to hear Max's story, when Max and I hit Everest Base Camp, this one, I was wearing a Breitling Supro shirt.
Yeah, so what's the best to climb a mountain?
Which, a Breitling Supro,
With
which
a
in
diving
fairness,
watch.
in fairness,
Yeah, so you attack me for wearing a moon watch when you're
yeah,
wearing a diving
bingo,
watch.
but that's the watch. That's the
tallest
watch I wear.
mountain
And in fairness, you know,
on the planet.
Breitling's a brand that we respect hugely. The customer service is stunning, but it performed really well. And then when we hit Mount Toubkal, which was the highest mountain, I think that one there, in North Africa, I was wearing another Breitling. I was wearing the Breitling Avenger, which also performed incredibly well, and of course was indestructible, and was, you know, that really tough sort of James Bond piece, which I also don't have, because that went to fund some more sort of watch habit stuff. But interestingly, Breitling on both the occasions and performed very steady.
I was wearing a Seiko. A modded Seiko, 50 fathoms.
That you no longer have?
No, I sold it, but it worked great.
The only thing I do have was the hat, which of course we brought back from that. Anyway,
No, I didn't know you had that link from. So if you do another peak, then you have to get another
Breitling, yeah.
So that's a Breitling lineage. I feel like this episode has a lot of point counterpoints because it's a bit tricky when you're talking about the first achievements or the best spec, because it's sometimes it can be, as you said, history is written by the winners, or things can be a bit relative depending on the conditions. And so you were saying Breitling doesn't really make sense to use because it's a diving watch.
No, I don't say it doesn't make sense. I was just taking the mickey out of him because he was taking the mickey out of me.
Well, let me take the mickey out of you, taking the mickey out of him, taking the mickey out of... We're going in circles. Do you remember the Netflix show about the 14 Peaks?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So, the 14 Peaks was a feat-covered... it was called Project Possible, and the idea was to climb the 14 tallest peaks. So this was done by a gentleman called Nimau Nims Puja, and the watch he was wearing during these 14 peaks was the Breitling Supermarine.
how well.
So he was wearing this one right here.
Bremont. Not Bremont.
Sorry, the Bremont Super...
It's a B.
It has a
Two
B.
breeze, so...
It seems a bit PR stunt, isn't it?
No,
So
You're not sponsored?
So
Original
he
Bremont.
was wearing it. Was
Yeah.
it sponsored or not sponsored? I don't know. But
Or-
what I do know is that after the feat, Bremont created a special edition watch for Neil Mao, which makes me believe that actually it was his own choice to pick this watch. He could have been sponsored, but it was his own choice because the watch that was a limited edition looks completely different. The watch that's a limited edition
with
also,
oh look, it's a white dial.
Yeah, it's a white dial,
Huh?
Yeah. Huh? Ooh, white dial would be terrible in the snow. Meanwhile, the guy who climbs the 14 tallest mountains in the world
As a white dial.
2 months chose a white dial.
Yeah, well, maybe they just gave him that, and then they made the next one the dark blue because they were like, well, that was a stupid choice, Nims.
Look at it.
The white hands.
This guy's smart. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Well, this episode's a shamble. So the new one that was created has the 14 mountains Persia climbed on the backside of the rotor. It uses a GMT function instead, which to me makes more sense for someone doing 14 different peaks because the one he had didn't have that function.
Yes, yeah.
But it is interesting to see that he must have tried to prepare himself to the utmost, and he still went with a diving watch with a diving bezel, which technically could be super useful. And just to give another little Bremont story. Now, the whole new Bremont... That's a squirrel.
Is it?
Yeah. Look.
Live from the studio.
Look. Bremont, the whole new collection is called Terra Nova.
Yeah.
And it looks pretty ugly. So we don't like it, right? We're not a big fan of the rebranding or the new models. It lacks a little bit of elegance.
The CEO just wanted his own brand, and then just like, okay, let me just buy a brand with history, and then let me just pull over it and do whatever I want. I mean, it's basically what happened.
Yeah.
No offense, but
So back to the Antarctic exploration. The Terra Nova was actually an exhibition to go to the South Pole. And so it was a competition between different nations, and two major nations were the British and the Norwegians. And the aim was, and this was accomplished in 1911, where the Norwegians was the first to actually reach the South Pole. And 5 weeks later, the British did. The captain, so Robert Falcon, actually died during the process. What's important is that back in 2014, a British polar explorers again, Ben Saunders and his teammate Taka Lepeniere, rewrote history with a world-breaking Antarctic expedition where both of them walked an average of 70 miles daily with temperatures at 46 degrees Celsius and below, and they had to carry over 200 kilograms of material themselves. So they beat the record in terms of the most amount of mileage walk with the most amount of weight with the etc. to redo what Sir Robert Falcon did. And outside their polar jackets, they were also wearing these. And these are the Bremont Supermarine. And so I think that's where the Terra Nova link comes from, because this is amazing feat, Antarctic expedition. It just doesn't have Terra Nova on it. And I almost prefer the idea that it doesn't need to be branded for something to be used for something. So the fact that this is, again, a Supermarine watch, you know, I'd rather have this than get a newer Terra Nova that is going to regurgitate the history. So Bremont, super strong on the Arctic side, who would have known? And, you know, snowy exhibitions.
We've got great feats before the change.
So listen, there are so many great watches you could choose for trekking. Clearly, one of the unspoken truths is that you'd always have a Garmin, either clipped to your bag or on your wrist, and so that's probably one of the pieces. But apart from the smartwatch, and if I was going to choose a particular watch, from what we're looking at the moment, it would be the U2, it would be the Sin. Those watches are made from, you know, the German submarines, really thick metal, and they're absolutely unbreakable and indestructible. I think they go from minus 45 degrees to plus 80 is a temperature piece, and they've got this special oil inside the cases. It's one of the very few quartzes that I think is worth that extra money, because there's a lot of them are the automatic models, but they do also have a quartz. I think we've seen that together. So the UXS, I think it's called, where it's an absolute flat top dial with the oil inside, and it's absolutely a stunning watch. Cool. And there's a lot of work that's gone into that. So that would probably be my watch of choice.
That's a really good choice.
Yeah, not bad.
Really good choice.
Any final thoughts?
And no jokes were made there.
No jokes were made.
How cool is that?
Which is quite surprising.
Impressive for him.
So, any final thoughts?
Well, yeah, our watches.
I don't really have one.
But they're the final thoughts.
You don't have you didn't pick one?
I did, but it's a boring pick because we can guess what it is.
What's your boring pick?
No.
Do it again. Oh, the Breitling emergency.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, it's a bit boring, but to be honest, if you're going to go on a trek and you're going on your own, I don't think there's anything better, really. I mean, you get lost, you pull the call out, and a helicopter comes to pick you up. It's nothing else better you can get, to be honest.
Yeah, they're pretty cool. Because if you're going to do the same thing, but yeah, it's a very cool.
I think it's just they're indestructible watches. Like you said, the Breitlings just brought you for the mountain, so it's the same. Very tough watch. You get helicopter support when you need it. It's really legible, and I'll just go for an emergency.
Good call.
Well, I went for a pick that's a bit more fun. If I can get any brand to sponsor me, I would get this watch. This was always a grail piece in my mind, but wouldn't it be bloody awesome to have this piece? So this is the limited edition.
The Everest is the Everest fashion on course isn't it? Yeah.
It is perfect. It was made for an American mountaineer who does a lot of photography, Coral Richards. I believe they only made 150 examples that they put on the market.
That is nice.
And it is genuinely, I think, one of my favorite watches. A, from the whole overseas collection, and B, potentially from...
I love the color scheme. It's really nice.
Yeah.
It looks sandblasted.
Very likely to be sandblasted. It's a titanium and stainless steel case, 41 millimeters, 150 meters water resistance, which is interesting to see with all these expedition mountaineering watches that they would want it. But I'm assuming there's a correlation with going up in height as well and going down below, because you're still having a differential in
We have lower pressure.
pressure, compensation. There you go.
Very good choice. I think you have the coolest trekking watch ever there.
yeah.
Well done.
Very cool.
So remember, guys, to
Like,
and to
subscribe
and comment. Let us know what you want us to talk about. Let us know what you want us to review. Send us your watches a review. Ask us anything. We're here for you. We're loving the journey. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. And do give Jason a happy birthday down below in the comments if you can.
See you soon.
See you soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.